Well, good evening. It is amazing to be standing here. I spent the afternoon just walking around a little bit. I had some appointments. I got to spend some time with Father Gerardo and a video, and with Caroline on a video, and then there was these gaps between. Just walking around the property and remembering just brought back memory after memory after memory. And it even worked without my wife, Chris, being here. Because Chris and I have been married for almost 37 years now, and we have learned that we have one brain between us. So we have to stay together. I mean, there's no way we have to. Because without, we both forget, and we put it together and we have the one thing. But even here by myself, I was able to remember so much. And so many stories in each sort of corner of the building. And it's been just beautiful. So I thank you. Chris, I thank you for the invitation to come. And thank you all for coming out. It was a long time ago that I was at St. Michael's. So for you to come and join us to say your prayers this evening is a beautiful thing. As Mary said, we've been up and down the interstate, 75 and 35 throughout the entire ministry. And now we have landed in Austin, Texas, where I'm the rector of St. David's. And we bid you good luck on your 75th anniversary. And we think it's really cute because we're about to celebrate 175 years. It is the oldest Protestant church building in Austin. And so it is right. She is the old lady who's been in the neighborhood longer than anybody else. And so it's really fun to serve in that role. And the part that's really kind of remarkable, as Mary said, I'm an avid outdoorsman, and I'm a peacemaking, middle child, centrist sort of human being. And I work in the political capital of the state with a congregation that is quite activist, and not a one of them owns a fishing rod or a firearm. But somehow it still works, and we're having a great time. It's a great ministry. Today, we're going to take our text. The text that we just heard came from this past Sunday's lectionary. If you were in church, you know that. Both the Exodus and the gospel lesson. It's a portion of the gospel lesson that was assigned for the day. Those are going to be our text. We're also going to appeal to a couple of poems that I find very helpful and useful. Poetry has become very important to me, particularly over the last 6 or 7 years. There was a season when I was trying to pray the daily office, and frankly, it had just gone cold. And reading morning prayer, maybe it was just what the daily office, the lectionary was doing, but it was a rehearsal of the history of war in the Old Testament. And frankly, I just got tired. I got tired of all of the war and all of the pain. So I decided for a little while to substitute some poetry for that part of my daily office. And that has stuck. I still read some of the scriptures assigned, but really I have a stack of books of poetry. And it has become a really important part of my own prayer life. And so we'll try to put some of this together and see what happens. So when we catch up with Moses today in the story out of Exodus, his entire world has been burned to ashes at least twice in his life. First, when he was an infant, and his mother made the basket, the story you all know. You learned his children made a basket, put him in it, and set him down the Nile River. Imagine the horror and terror that was required for a mother to do this, mostly just to protect him from the violence of the Egyptians at the time. So his whole world, first world, reduced to ash. The second time, then imagine that this basket drifted him right into the palace of the Pharaoh himself, where he was raised. And so he had a new world, a new life where he lived. And that was going along pretty well until one day he was out and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. And in his anger and his frustration and his rage, he killed the Egyptian. And then his whole world was reduced to ash once again. And now he is on the run. So by the time we catch up with him tonight, he is a murderer on the run. So just keep that in mind if you think that God has no use for you because of some questionable choices you might have made in your life. Moses is a murderer on the run, and he is about to have an encounter with the creator of the universe. He's been on the run for a while. I mean, he's been there long enough to get married, to have a father-in-law, and he's watching his father-in-law's sheep. And Moses has never been a hometown boy anywhere. He's always been a foreigner in a strange land. And this is the case for him now. So imagine if that's the way you live your whole life. One of the things is that you pay attention a lot. You pay close attention to your environment. Anytime you're in a place you've never been before, that's what we do, right? We're looking carefully. We're reading the signs. And so he is paying attention. And he has the encounter that we just heard. With the encounter with the burning bush, the Lord says, take off your shoes. You're on holy ground. He lays into the dust. And he hears this word from the Lord that finally, God's going to intervene and lead the Hebrew people out of slavery. And he's going to use a murderer on the run to do it. You know, I can't read this passage anymore without thinking about David White's poem, Fire in the Earth. That's the name of the collection of poetry. I commend the whole collection to you. But this is what he says. And we know when Moses was told, in the way he was told, take off your shoes, he grew pale from that simple reminder of fire in the dusty earth. He never recovered his complicated way of loving again, and was free to move in the same way he felt the fire licking at his heels loved him, as if the lion earth could roar and take him in a single movement. Every step he took from there on was carefully placed. Everything he said mattered, as if he knew the constant witness of the ground and he remembered his own face in the dust the moment before revelation. Since then, thousands have felt the same immobile tongue with which he tried to speak, like the moment you too saw, for the first time, your own house turned to ashes, everything consumed, so that the road could open again. Your entire presence in your eyes, and the world turning slowly into a single branch of flame. Let's back up one sentence. Like the moment you two saw for the first time, your own house turned to ashes, everything consumed, so that the road could open again. As we move our attention now from that, let's just hold those images. We move our attention to the portion of the gospel that we just heard. Somebody approaches Jesus at the beginning of this gospel lesson and asks him a question. Said, you just pulling something straight out of the headlines of the day. Did you hear what just happened? What Pilate did, he mixed the blood of Galileans with the blood of the sacrifice. So not only is this murderous and horrible, it's also blasphemous. Can you imagine this? Why did this happen? And at first, Jesus responds to this age-old question that believers have had in every religion since the beginning of time. How does all this work? Where is God in the midst of all of the chaos and pain and beauty and blessing of our lives? How do we see God? How do we know it's God? And for a minute, it looks like Jesus is going to give us a handle. He's going to give us a handle of embracing random acts. He says, wait, do you think those Galileans were the worst Galileans in town? Well, of course not. And then Jesus rips out another headline. He goes, the other day over in Siloam, when that tower fell over and killed those 18 people, what, you think God gathered the 18 worst people in town and knocked the tower over on them? Of course not, he says. So for a moment, we're going, yes, okay, so that's not the way God is. God doesn't do these bad things. But then Jesus wraps it right back around the axle. He says, but if you don't repent, the same thing will happen to you. Man. And he leaves us there. He just leaves us hanging in this particular spot. And then he moves into this story about the farmer, the vineyard owner. He comes to his vineyard, he goes to the fig tree, no figs. 3 years, no figs. So he tells the gardener, let's pull that tree out. It's just taking up the soil. And the gardener says, no, wait a minute. Could we just give it one more year? Let me work on it, see what I can do. And next year, if there's no fruit, we can tear it out. And I wonder if the next year he came and he said, wait, one more year. The next year, and we can pull it out. And so what we see is Jesus doesn't get us out of the dilemma. We stay in this constant state of having never been here before, of constantly wrestling with the good and the bad and the beautiful and the horrible, and where is God in the midst of it all? Constantly trying to figure that out. And so when we have somewhere we've never been before, we pay attention, and then we hear this same chorus, but the road is open again. We don't know how God is moving in any particular place, but what we can see at the end almost every single time is the road is open again. Maybe this is one of the primary character traits of the loving God, is that just at the end of whatever it is, a new road is open again. I can tell you personally, this is a story I don't share often because it's really about my children, and they're not here to tell me not to. So I can do it anyway. But I want to tell you this story about what happens when you're in uncharted territory, you're paying attention, you try to hold things loosely, and then a road opens again. Because the whole time we were here at St. Michael's, Chris and I were going through the infertility game. We had decided to have children starting in Sewanee. Sewanee's a good place to make a baby. And so we thought that would be a good thing. Nothing happened. We came here, nothing happened. So that was our daily fare. And if you've walked this road, you know what it's like. It is all consuming and in every way. And we worked at it, we went to the doctors, we did all the tests, and no one could tell us why we weren't getting pregnant. We just weren't. And we finally came to this spot where we realized that this dream that we had of having babies, that world has been reduced to ash. It's just gone. It's not going to be part of who we are. And we did this together mostly, but we also did it in the arms of many of you, Kim and Jeff, holding us and helping us. Kevin and Galen Huddleston holding us and helping us. And many of you just being there with us while we navigated. The Spirit softened our hearts in some way, and we kind of came to the conclusion that, reproducing ourselves was not really the goal in the first place, but we think it would be fun to have kids in the house. We think at least on paper, we look like pretty good candidates for being parents. A nurse and a priest, it's pretty good. So we started thinking about adoption, and then I was in a conversation with Paul Talbot, and he suggested that I call Shannon Lynch, who is also a member of St. Michael's, who was a family lawyer and did a lot of adoptions. So we called Shannon, and the road opened again. Just a new way. Answers no question at all about why all this other stuff happened. It's just a road that opened again for something else to happen. And so right as we were leaving here, we had finalized the adoption for Caleb, our oldest son. As a matter of fact, our sort of housewarming present when we came to St. Peter's in McKinney was a new car seat for the new car that we had to have for the baby. And then over the next few years, we adopted Colton right away, our middle son. And then 7 years later, and a much longer story, and we can now tell that when we have wine in our hand, along came the baby girl Caroline, who is now the center of all of our lives. It is this strange thing. The road opened again. And one of the strange things about being an adopted parent, I can't really compare it to a biological parent because we've never done that, but being an adopted parent is you hold the whole thing pretty loosely. Because they're yours, but they're not. There's this profound love and attachment, and yet you're also watching them become who they are kind of on their own. Hold them loosely. And we watched the race car oldest one that we have, who is now an auto technician and builds really fast cars. We watched our middle son, who is really 65 years old, become a therapist. And now he is a therapist at Austin Oak Psychiatric Hospital in Austin. And we watch our wild little 20-year-old finish up her degree at San Marcos at Texas State, and she wants to be a physical therapist. the road opening again in some way. You know, the Exodus and the gospel lesson create for us more questions than answers about how God actually works in the world. But you know, that's the way our lives work anyway. I mean, how many of us have real answers about why the things happen that happen in our lives? We have to confess that even as practicing Christians, sometimes God seems utterly disinterested in our lives. And we have to rest with that. But just about the time we decide that that's the way God always is, God is just absent, well, something else happens. And a road is open again. And we sense that the hand of God is at work in the world somehow. Through technology, through new friends, through old friends. Some way, sensing that God is here. You know, I've been a priest now for over 30 years because you let me do it, and you let me go do it other places too, which maybe is questionable about your judgment. But I've been a priest for 30 years and I still don't know how this works. But what I have seen and experienced over and over and over again in my own personal life and as a witness of other people's lives is that when the world is reduced to ash, a road is open again. A new way, a new thing that allows us to continue to walk in the steps with God. The poet laureate of the entire universe, Mary Oliver, in her poem In Blackwater Woods, says it this way: look at the trees, are turning their own bodies into pillars of light, are giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are bursting and floating away over the blue shoulders of the ponds, and every pond, no matter what its name, is now nameless. Every year, everything I have ever learned in my lifetime leads back to this: the fires and the black river of loss, whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. Then she says, to live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends upon it, and when the time comes, to let it go. To let it go. When things are going beautifully in your world, and I hope that's true for some of you, give thanks, but hold it loosely. Let it go, so that the road can open again. And when the whole world is reduced to ash, which is the case often for us, hold the ashes loosely, so that the road can open again. In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Friends, will you please stand? Will you open your red prayer books, page 130? Let us begin by saying the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father,
Who art